कुंज बिहारी जय गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी जय गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी यशोदनंदन व्रज जनरंजन यशोदनंदन व्रज जनरंजन यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी जय गोपीचन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी यशोदनंदन व्रज जनरंजन यशोदनंदन व्रज जनरंजन यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्ण 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा शील प्रभुपादा एवं विष्णुपाद परमहंस प्रदेश अष्टोत्तर श्रीमद इस वेदांत स्वामी शिल प्रभुपाद की जय। इस्कॉन संस्थापक शिल प्रभुपाद की जय। एवं विष्णुपाद परमहंस प्रदेश अष्टोत्तर श्रीमद भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की जय। एवं विष्णुपाद लघु विश्वदास महाराज की जय। एवं विष्णुपाद सच्चिदानंद शिल भक्ति विनोद ठाकुर की जय। एवं विष्णुपाद वैष्णव सार्वभौम श्री जगन्नाथ दास महाराज की जय। जय श्री रूप सनातन भक्त रघुनाथ श्री जी गोपाल भट्टदास अविनाश गोस्वामी प्रभु की जय। नमाचार्य श्रीदास ठाकुर की जय। प्रेम से गो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत दादा शिवसादि गौर भक्तवृंद की श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोपिना श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गोवर्धन की जय, श्री श्री गौरांगी बैंगलोर ईश्वर भगवान की जय, श्री मायपुर धाम की जय, श्री वृंदावन धाम की जय, गंगा माई की यमुना माई की भक्ति देवी की जय, तुलसी देवी की जय, अनंत मोरी वैष्णव की जय, श्री हरिनाम संकीर्तन की जय, ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय, इस्कॉन वर्तमान गुरुवंद की जय, स्मारक भक्तों की जय, प्रेमानंद and all glories to the assembled ones, all glories to the assembled ones, all glories to the assembled, all glories to the all glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gaura, all glories to Sri Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam, Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jayamudire, Nashtaprayeshu Apatreshu Nityam Bhagavat Sevaya, Bhagavati Uttama Sloke Bhakti Bhavati Naishtigi. Om Karoli Vachari Bhagavana Devi Swami Shri Guru Tathagata Paramananda Shri Chaitanya. Hare Krishna. So welcome you all to the Saturday morning Srimad Bhagavatam summary study. So today we are discussing from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, chapter 25, entitled The Glories of Devotional Service. We'll read from text 20, discuss from text 23 to text 44. So just to connect to the previous slokas that has been read by the previous speaker, a summary of that. Kardamuni actually left Mother Devahuti, and then she was left alone with Kapila Dev. So Kapila Dev stayed with her, and he asked Mother Devahuti actually to. In fact, Devahuti was lamenting after Kardamuni left, and she asked Lord Kapila that I am very much disturbed by my senses. So please dispel my illusion, because due to my false ego, I've been engaged in the service of the Maya, and I've identified with my body and all my bodily relationships. So I'm taking shelter of you. So therefore, please I'm offering my obeisances. Please accept it and enlighten me with the realities of life, about the absolute truth. What is the difference between body and soul? Why are the threefold miseries affecting a person who is conditioned soul in this material world, so forth? She asked so many questions. So Lord Kapila, he explains a yoga system relating to the connection between the Lord and the Supreme Lord, and how a living entity can get the benefit of this yoga process, and how one can attain detachment from all the happiness and distress in this material world through these yoga processes. So in the last two slokas, we see that Kapila explains the qualities of a devotee, and he says, he explains, then text number 23, we start from here. He says, a devotee engaged constantly in chanting and hearing about me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The sadhus do not suffer from material miseries, because they are always filled with the thoughts of my pastimes and activities. He says that devotees are always engaged in glorifying the Lord by his with the thoughts of the Lord's pastimes and activities, and therefore they are never affected by the threefold material miseries. So there are three types of material miseries that affect the conditioned soul in this material world, and they are like Adhyatmika, the sufferings caused by body and mind; Adi Bhautika, that is sufferings caused by other living entities; and Adi Devika, these are sufferings caused by due to natural disturbances. So living entities are put into suffering because of these three material miseries. But he says that because devotees are always engaged in discussing the transcendental pastimes and activities of the Lord, their minds are always filled with Krishna consciousness. And therefore, they are not disturbed by these threefold miseries, and they are always forgetful of the miseries of the material existence. And Srila Prabhupada gives an example of Maharaj Ambrisha, how he was always engaged his mind. This is an example given from the 9th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where he mentions about Maharaj Ambrisha, who was always engaging his mind in meditating on the lotus feet of the Lord, his words in describing the glories of the Lord, his hands in cleaning the Lord's temple, his ears in hearing the words spoken by Krishna or about Krishna, his eyes engage in seeing the beauty of the deity of Krishna in the temple, and we are also in the temples of Krishna in places like Mathura, Vrindavan, etc. He also engaged his sense of touching the bodies of the Lord's devotees. He engaged his sense of smell in smelling the fragrance of tulasi that is offered to the Lord. And he also engaged his tongue in tasting the Lord's prasada. He also he engaged his legs in walking to the holy places and temples of the Lord, his head in bowing down before the Lord, and all his desires in serving the Lord 24 hours a day. So, in fact, Maharaja Ambrisha never desired anything for his own sense gratification, and he engaged all his senses in devotional service in various engagements which we have explained to you, all related to the Lord. And he further concludes that this is the way to increase our attachment for the Lord and become completely from all the material desires. So we all have many material desires, and these desires flow one after the other, and they by the moment one desire is fulfilled, there are another 10 desires that is lining up. This is one way to be free from all these material desires is to engage our senses in the service of the Lord. When we engage our senses in the service of the Lord, then one becomes free from all these material miseries. And one, in fact, forgets all these material miseries because his senses are always engaged in the senses are all in the three modes of material nature. That is mode of goodness, mode of passion, or mode of ignorance. But the Lord's activity, Lord being absolute, all his activities, pastimes are all transcendent to the three modes of material nature. So when the senses, the mind, everything is engaged in the senses of the Lord, that's why one of the Lord's name is Rishikesha. Then one transcends these three modes of material nature and becomes free from these material miseries. There are some similar examples that we quote from Srimad Bhagavatam. In the fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there is a prayer from Dhruva Maharaj. I will not read this sloka because we may not have time. The translation says, Dhruva Maharaj continues in his prayers, he says, "O unlimited Lord, kindly bless me so that I may associate with great devotees who engage in your transcendental loving service constantly, as the waves of a river constantly flow." So he's seeking blessings from the Lord so that he may engage in serving the devotees of the Lord, just as the waves of a river flow. Because these devotees are always engaged in the service of the Lord. So they are constantly engaged. So such transcendental devotees are completely situated in an uncontaminated state of life. So whatever the external environment, however it may be contaminated, those who are engaged in the service of the Lord are always situated in an uncontaminated state. So Dhruva Maharaj is asking for association with such great devotees who are always engaged in the service of the Lord. And further he says that by the process of devotional service, I shall surely be able to cross this Neshine's ocean of material existence, which is filled with waves of blazing fire like dangers. So this material ocean is nothing but full of dangers. That's why we sing in the morning prayers to the Lord, Samsara Dava Nanali the Loka. This whole material world is like a blazing fire. So Dhruva Maharaj prays that in this material world, which is an ocean of material existence, an assigned ocean of material existence, by the process of devotional service, one overcomes all these dangers. And then finally he concludes the prayer by saying, it will be very easy for me, for I am becoming mad to hear about the transcendental qualities and pastimes which are eternally existent. So all these pastimes of the Lord, the qualities of the Lord, they are all eternal. So he says, by giving me an opportunity to associate with such devotees who has always engaged in the service of the Lord, I'll be able to overcome this Neshan ocean of material existence, which is like a blazing fire. Similarly, on similar lines, Prahlad Maharaja prays in the seventh canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. He says, I am not at all afraid of material existence. For wherever I stay, I am fully absorbed in the thought of your glories and activities. So irrespective of wherever he is, Prahlad Maharaj in fact was tortured by none other than his own father, Hiranyakashipu. But he says that I'm not at all afraid of this material existence because wherever I stay, I'm absorbed in the thought of your glories and activities. Further, he says, my concern is only for the fools and rascals who are making elaborate plans for material happiness and maintaining their families, societies, and countries. I'm simply concerned with love for them. But ordinary conditioned soul being forgetful of the activities of Lord, always full of anxieties and material tribulation. That means those who are trying to attain some happiness in this material world, by trying to maintain their families or societies or even the country, they are always forgetful of activities of the Lord, and they're always full of anxieties every moment of time and these material tribulations. But Prahlad Maharaj is being engaged always in the service of the Lord. He is not at all afraid of these material miseries. So this is how Lord Kapila explains the qualities of a devotees who do not suffer due to these material miseries. Text number 24. Lord Kapila says, O my mother, O virtuous lady, these are the qualities of great devotees who are free from all attachment. You must seek attachment to such holy men, for this counteracts the pernicious effects of material attachment. So here to his mother, he is advising that the devotees of the Lord are always engaged in the service of the Lord. So they are forgetful of the material miseries. And because of these devotees, they are all free. These devotees are free from all types of attachment. Generally, we see in this material we develop so much of attachment to our kith and kin, family, extended on an extension basis comes to even our society or even our country and so forth. But those who are engaged in the service of the Lord, they become free from all these attachments. And further, he concludes that you must seek attachment to such holy men, for this counteracts the pernicious effects of material attachment. So Lord Kapila instructs his mother that in order to become free from all these attachments that you have, and we see Devahuti actually starts by saying that I have a lot of attachment and due to my ignorance. So please uh, uh, open my eyes so that I can become free from this attachment. So here Kapila instructs that you should try to develop attachment to those devotees who are always engaged in the service of the Lord, by which you can become free from the attachment to all of this material world. Now, here there's a mention of a pernicious effect. What happens is that when we develop and attach to anything that is material, over a period of time, it builds a mental impression in our mind. And what happens is that at the end of our life, it is the mind that carries us to the next gross body and the subtle body. So when we develop attachment, these devotees of the Lord who are always engaged in the service of the Lord, then automatically we become detached from all these material attachments. Now, artificially, irrespective of whatever we try, it is very difficult to develop some sort of a detachment. But when we develop attachment to such devotees of the Lord, then one becomes automatically detached from all that is material. So therefore, he says that you should desire their association, by which you will become free from all material association. Generally, what happens is we develop so many types of associations in our day-to-day life. Association within the family, within our working environment, within the society environment. We have so many associations because of which we carry the qualities of those who are in that association, materialistic association, by which we, over a period of time, develop all this attachment because we are not ignorant of the real truth. But one who develops attachment to these devotees of the Lord, then automatically one becomes detached from all this material existence, which is false. If you see everything that is existing in this material world, there is no reality. When we might think that everything looks very attractive for us, but everything is temporary, nothing is permanent, nor our family, nor our opulence that we have. With the end of this life, everything comes to an end. So he says that a pure soul who is prepared to be free from this material entanglement, must become free from the association of the three modes of material nature. Generally, any type of association that we develop in this material world, it's all within these three modes: goodness, passion, and ignorance. So, soul desiring to become free from this material entanglement should become free from these three modes of material nature, that is the association of those who are in these three modes of material nature, for which one has to transcend these three modes of material nature, for which again they have to become attached to devotees who are above the three modes of material nature. Srila Prabhupada gives a quote from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15 and text 5 in this particular sloka Prabhupada. He says that those who are free from false prestige, illusion, and false association, who understand the external, who are done with material lust, who are free from the dualities of happiness and distress, and who unbewildered know how to surrender unto the Supreme Person, they attain to that eternal kingdom. The abode of the Supreme Lord is transcendental in nature beyond the these three modes. But in this particular sloka, the Lord instructs Arjuna, how can one transcend these three modes of meditation? By becoming free from false prestige, illusion, and false association. And those who become free from these, they understand what is eternity, and they are completely done from the dualities of this happiness and distress. Such a person surrenders to the Supreme Lord, and one must surrender to such devotees of the Lord. Now, generally, we identify somebody to be materially rich or poor or respectable or opulent. But if someone wants to become free from this, one has to transcend these, because all of them are temporary in nature. And once he transcends, then he becomes free from all this material puffed up condition, because it is a false position. Therefore, it says that there is no association. Srila Prabhupada mentioned that in this material world, there is no association which can free oneself from this material association. So he established this Krishna conscious movement, so that those who come to this movement, they become automatically from the three modes of material nature by associating with devotees who are engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. Srila Prabhupada further gives an example, two examples. This is an example of a cat. In one example is that the cat always carries its kitten in the mouth, but when the cat carries the kitten feels very secured in the hands of its mother, that is a cat. But the same mouth, when the cat carries a rat, the rat is actually struggling to survive. It feels that it is going to be killed by the cat. So it's in the moment of death. So this is the one example by which one can understand that devotees of the Lord who are always engaged in the service of the Lord, engaged in the association of the devotees who are engaged in the service of the Lord, it is like they are in the mouth of a cat. They are actually safe in the hands of the Lord. So they are never fearful of or are afraid of this material existence. But on the other hand, those who are materially engaged, their existence is just like the cat in the mouth of a rat. They are always fearful of these material miseries, and they are always fearing death at every moment of time. Therefore, in this particular sloka, Lord Kapila concludes that one should therefore give up the association of materialistic person and seek the association of persons engaged in Krishna consciousness. And by such association, he will benefit in spiritual advancement. And by their words and instructions, he will be able to cut off his attachment to material existence. So like I mentioned in the beginning of the class, that we have a lot of attachment to this material world. But by associating with devotees of the Lord who are always engaged in activities, glorifying the activities of the Lord, one automatically becomes detached from all that is material, and they progress spiritually. Text number 25. Yeah. Then he says, Lord Kapila tells his mother, he says, in the association of pure devotees, discussion of the pastimes and activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is very pleasing and satisfying to the ear and the heart. By cultivating such knowledge, one gradually becomes advanced on the path of liberation and therefore he is freed, and his attraction becomes fixed. Then real devotion and devotional service begins. So what happens is that when devotees gather together, normally when people meet in clubs or societies or even in the families, when they family members when they meet, they don't discuss spiritual subjects, but they discuss anything that is related to the material world. They may be politics or economics or social science or whatever it may be. They always discuss topics that are related to this material world, which is within the three modes of material nature. But devotees of the Lord, when they gather together, they always discuss about the pastimes and activities of the Lord, which is actually very pleasing and satisfying both to the ear and the heart. And when one hears that, one cultivates knowledge, real knowledge, and gradually becomes advanced on the path of liberation. And therefore, he becomes free, and his attraction becomes fixed on the Lord. And then once devotion's path of devotional service begins. So when one joins joins the association of devotees of the Lord, and when he hears the glories of the Lord from the devotees of the Lord, automatically one attains the real knowledge, and he becomes liberated at that. He starts progressing on the path of liberation. What is liberation? Actually, liberation is in this particular is Devahuti is asking to become free from material misery because she feels the senses are a sort of a disturbance for her. But he says that if in the association of devotees, they discuss always the glories of the Lord, by which one becomes, one understands what is the real truth and becomes attached to that absolute truth, which is transcendent to the three modes of material nature. So such association automatically frees oneself from these three material modes. In fact, there is a nice quote in Bhagavad Gita itself, where the Lord tells Arjuna in the 10th chapter, 9th sloka, he says, the thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me, and their lives are fully devoted to my service, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss from always enlightening one another and conversing about me. So devotees, whenever they gather, they don't discuss politics, they don't discuss science, they don't discuss economics, but they discuss devotional service to the Lord, which is enlightening to one another, and by which they become free from these three modes of material nature. So here in this sloka, it is mentioned that at the beginning stage, a devotee actually practices devotion service as a sadhaka. Sadhaka means we practice Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, devotional service based on rules and regulations. But when we start practicing the Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, automatically over a period of time, we develop attraction for devotional service. And then as we progress further, it takes us to the advanced stage of Raganuga bhakti. We develop spontaneous attachment to the activities of the Lord, to see his beauty, to be engaged in his activities. Text number 26. Further, Lord Kapila explains the devotees of the Lord, qualities of the devotees of the Lord. He says, thus consciously engaged in devotional service in the association of devotees, a person gains distaste for sense gratification. This is text 26. So by taking association of devotees of the Lord, one gains a distaste for sense gratification, both in this world and in the next, by constantly thinking about the activities of the Lord. So when one always associates with the Lord, he develops a taste for devotional service by hearing about the activities of the Lord, which are transcendental. So when that happens, one automatically develops a distaste for sense gratification in this world as well as the next. And Kapila says this process of Krishna consciousness is the easiest process of mystic power. And when one is actually situated on that path of devotional service, he is able to control the mind. Actually, the mind is very difficult to control. Arjuna himself says in Bhagavad Gita, it's called Chanchala. It's always disturbing. But when one gets into the association of devotees of the Lord, then automatically the mind becomes controlled. When mind is controlled, the senses are controlled. And when they are engaged in the service of the Lord, then one develops a taste for devotional service to the Lord, which is about the three modes. Now, many times what happens is that in the scriptures itself, in the Bhagavad Gita itself, in the beginning of chapters, I mentioned about activities in the Vedas by which one can get promoted to the heavenly planets by performance of fruitive activities or pious activities. But devotees of the Lord, they are not interested in these activities because they know that anything in this material world that is there, it is temporary in nature. And even if one attempts to go to the heavenly planets, one day he has to come back once the results of his pious activities are exhausted. So one might perform Dhyana Yoga, one might perform Ashtanga Yoga also. By performance of these types of yogas, one might attain like the heavenly planets. But once the results of these pious activities are over, one again has to come back to this material world. So sometimes devotees, by performance of these other practices of yoga, may get some mystic power also. Such mystic powers devotees can attain even by the practice of bhakti yoga. But then devotees are not interested in these mystic type of powers because they are ultimately, these mystic powers are nothing but a sort of a materialistic power by which one gets carried away by this material nature. So then, Sri Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakura, one of the prominent acharyas in our Sampradaya, in his commentary of Srimad Bhagavatam, he says that any yoga that is mixed with Dhyana Yoga or Bhakti or Jnana Yoga, they are not pure yoga. Yoga actually means linking oneself to the Lord. But he mentioned that they are not the real Bhakti Yoga. They may be mixed with other yogas, but they are by practice of such mixed bhakti and other yogas, one may get some result, but it will not give the ultimate result, which is the love of Godhead. But by practicing pure bhakti, one develops a taste for sense gratification. And that happens by hearing the pastimes of the Lord, by which one is able to control the mind, which is the original goal of Ashtanga Yoga. So people practice Ashtanga Yoga, which is also very difficult in this age of Kali, by which they feel that they can control the mind. But what happens is that they might develop some mystic power, many different types of mystic powers, like Anima, Lahima, Mahima, etc. One can become lighter than the lightest, heavier than the heaviest. But what happens is that one becomes attached to these types of mystic powers, and they bind them in this material world. And the same mystic power can also be attained by Bhakti Yoga also, but devotees are not interested. We go to text number 27. He says, thus by not engaging in the service of the modes of material nature, but by developing Krishna consciousness, knowledge in renunciation, and by practicing yoga, in which the mind is always fixed in devotional service unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one achieves my association in this very life, for I am the Supreme Personality, the Absolute Truth. So when one engages, develops a taste for Krishna consciousness, one automatically develops detachment to any type of association with the three modes of material nature and does not engage in that service. And by developing a taste for serving Krishna, automatically one gets two things happen. One gets the real knowledge and one develops a renunciation also. And the ultimate result, what happens, the mind is always engaged in devotion service, by which then one attains the association of the Lord. So when we render a devotional service to the Lord, automatically, directly, we are associated with the Lord directly. Initially, we might not realize it, but we engage in the devotional service to the Lord. We are actually associating with the Lord himself. And here, Lord Kapila says that one achieves my association in this very life, for I am the Supreme Absolute Truth. The point is that when one engages all his senses, in fact, there is a nice sloka which says that Sarvopati Vinirmuktam Tatparat Nirmalam Rishikesa Rishikesa Evanam Bhakti. So when one does not engage in the three modes of his senses in the service of the three modes of material nature, but rather develops Krishna consciousness, one automatically gets knowledge and detachment. Then he further explains that the process of Bhakti Yoga, there are different kinds of different processes in this Bhakti Yoga, like Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, etc., of which Shravanam and Kirtanam is the former. Shravanam means hearing the pastimes of the Lord, and Kirtanam means chanting the glories of the Lord. And when one is engaged in Shravanam and Kirtanam, automatically what happens is one reaches the stage of Vishnu Smaranam. Vishnu Smaranam means always remembering the Supreme Lord. So when one is engaged in hearing and engaged in glorifying the Lord by Kirtan, automatically one remembers the stage, the Lord all the time. That is Vishnu Smaranam. So the point is that unless one has got good engagement by means of spiritual service, it is not possible for one to become detached from all that is material in nature. So we need something higher. When we develop an attachment to anything material which is inferior in nature, then we need something higher, and that higher engagement is engagement in spiritual service, which is Shravanam and Kirtanam. So he further says those who are not devotees, they are engaged in philanthropic or humanitarian work, such as opening a hospital or charitable institution. These are undoubtedly good work in the sense they are pious activities, but their results is that they may get some opportunities for higher sense gratification either in this life or next. So that means by performing pious activities like opening a hospital, school, and any other charitable institution, one will get pious results in this life, by which one can, in this life as well as next, one can reach higher planets. But those results are also temporary because they are all related to activities in this material world. But however, devotional service is beyond the boundary of sense gratification. So like I mentioned, devotional service is transcendental to the three modes of material nature, and therefore it is beyond the boundary of sense gratification. There is a mention of a little bit of about Jnana Yoga also in this sloka. Jnana Yoga means one tries to cultivate knowledge uh, by which one can try to enter the Brahma Jyoti. This Brahma Jyoti is none other than the glowing effulgence of the body of the Lord. But when one enters this Brahma Jyoti, what happens is he loses his spiritual identity. They say they want to become one with the Lord. One can never become one with the Lord. Actually, one may remain in the Brahma Jyoti, but what happens is that there is no practical devotional service there. Therefore, he suffocates and again comes down to this material world. And also in Brahma Jyoti, there is no chance of hearing the glories of the Lord because there are no activities. Then we go to text number 28. So after hearing all these instructions from Lord Kapila, actually Devahuti starts with asking for liberation from this material world by becoming free from the threefold material miseries. But after hearing, now in text number 28, she says, on hearing this statement of the Lord, Devahuti inquired, what kind of devotional service is worth developing and practicing to help me easily and immediately attain the service at your lotus feet? So she's asking Lord Kapila that what kind of devotional service should I practice so that I can become free from this material world, but at the same time I can attain service unto your lotus feet. So until now she was asking for liberation, but after hearing from Lord Kapila, she's asking that reaching the next stage, how can I attain service unto your lotus feet? So this is what happens when one associates with the devotees of the Lord. He does not ask for liberation anymore. He asks how to achieve service under the lotus feet of the Lord, which is our natural, original, constitutional position. Text number 29. Mother Devahuti says to Lord Kapila, the mystic yoga system, as I have explained, aims at the Supreme Personality of Godhead and is meant for completely ending this material existence. Please let me know the nature of that yoga system. How many ways are there by which one can understand in truth that sublime yoga? So now she is coming to the next stage. She says that how many types of yoga processes are there? And let me know the nature of the yoga system and how can I understand the truth, which is the best out of all these, by connecting to the as absolute truth, and which is the best process of all these. by which she can not only end the material existence, but also attain to service to the Lord. So there are different types of yoga processes. One is the Jnana Yoga, in which, like I mentioned, one tries to attain the impersonal Brahman Jyoti. And then the Hatha Yoga system or the Ashtanga Yoga, by which one tries to meditate on the personal aspect, that is the Paramatma feature of the Lord. The Lord is situated in everyone's heart as the Paramatma. And by this Ashtanga Yoga, one tries to focus his mind on this personal aspect. And the third is the absolute truth, or the uh, and the process is Bhakti Yoga, or a devotional service executed by the process of Shravanam and Kirtanam, by which one realizes the Bhagavan feature. There are three stages of realization of the supreme absolute truth. One is Brahma Jyoti, one is the Paramatma feature, and the third is the absolute truth, that is the Bhagavan feature. When one meditates on the Bhagavan feature of the Lord, automatically it covers the Brahman and Paramatma also. So these are the three different processes, that is Dhyana Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. These are different methods of self-realization. But Devahuti in her question refers particularly to the Bhakti Yoga system and the different process of hearing and chanting and etc. So as far as jnanis are concerned, they are interested in jnana yoga. But even like I mentioned, if they attain the Brahman effulgence, there is a chance of falling down in this material world because there is no process of hearing. Therefore, jnana yoga does not actually end the material existence. Similarly, regarding the Ashtanga yoga, which tries to focus on the Paramatma feature of the Lord, it is not possible to practice this particular yoga because for practicing of this yoga, one has to be in a disturbance-free environment, go somewhere to the forest or in the Himalayas, etc., and meditate, which is not possible. So examples are given, like Vishwamitra himself was a great yogi, but he fell down when we heard the sound of the tinkling of the angle bells of Menaka. So these yogis also tend to fall down. But Bhakti yogis, on the other hand, once they approach the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they never come back to this material world once they leave this material world. So there's a mention of something called nirvana. Nirvana means they try to end one's material existence, which is not possible unless and until one goes back to home, our original home, which is back to Godhead. So Bhakti Yoga is like straight away attaining the ultimate process of realizing Bhagavan, by which we go back to the spiritual world. And by going back to the spiritual, we become free from all the miseries of material existence in the material world. And by our constitutional position, we are engaged in the service of the Lord. Text number 30. She says, my dear son Kapila, after all, I am a woman. It is very difficult for me to understand the absolute truth because my intelligence is not very great. But if you will kindly explain it to me, even though I am not very intelligent, I can understand it and thereby feel free from and I can understand it and thereby feel the transcendental happiness. So now she's come to the next point, saying that being a woman, her intelligence is not very great. And she says, now since my intelligence is not great, please explain it this process in such a way that I can understand this process and thereby feel transcendental happiness. So Bhakti Yoga is one, or rather transcendental, the activities of the Lord are transcendental in nature, which can result in a stage called achieving transcendental bliss. Normally in material world, we try to attain a stage called happiness. But in the practice of devotional service, one attains a stage of bliss, which is even transcendental to the material happiness. So normally, the absolute truth is not understood by ordinary intelligent men. So Sri Vishwanath Thakura also says that Yasya Prasad Bhagavat Prasado in the Mangani Mangalati prayer. That means devotees of the Lord and the Lord are on one absolute platform. So now she is asking, Devahuti is asking herself, son to be merciful to her because she is less intelligent, and also he is mother. So by the grace of Kapila Deva, she says that it is possible for her to understand this absolute truth, even though subject matter is very difficult for ordinary person like women. So devotional service is something, it is very easy to practice and understand, but uh, people are generally engaged in gross material activities, and for them, it is very difficult to understand this devotional service. So Devahuti is asking her son to be merciful to her and explain this process of Bhakti Yoga in such a way that she can understand by his mercy. Text number 31. Sri Maitreya said, after hearing the statement of his mother, Kapila could understand her purpose and he became compassionate toward her, being because of being born of her body. He described the Sankhya system of philosophy, which is a combination of devotional service and mystic realization as received by disciplic succession. So Kapil Dev, out of compassion for his mother, he explains what is called the Sankhya Yoga, that explains in detail about the material elements. Material elements, like there are 24 material elements, like 5 gross elements, 3 subtle elements, the senses, and so forth. And then what is the process of yoga and how yoga can be filled with bhakti. So from text number 32 onwards, Lord Kapila tries to explain in detail about this philosophy. Text 32, Lord Kapila said, the senses are symbolic representations of the demigods, and their natural inclination is to work under the direction of the Vedic injunctions. As the senses are representatives of the demigod, so the mind is the representative of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The mind's natural duty is to serve. When that service spirit is engaged in devotional service to the Personality of Godhead without any motive, that is far better than even salvation. So here there is a mention about the various senses that we all have. Now, all these senses are representatives of the demigods, and they work under the directions of the demigod. And there are injunctions in the scriptures for various activities. So the senses are always engaged in some occupation, either in these material activities or the tendency is to be engaged in spiritual activities. But there are always tendencies there to be engaged. Senses cannot be inactive. So their natural tendency is to be always work for something. And the mind is the center of all these senses, or the leader of all these senses. But when it is engaged in when the mind is engaged in the service of the Lord, automatically the senses which are subservient to the senses, subservient to the mind, they also become engaged in the service of the Lord. Similarly, all the demigods who are there, they're always engaged in the activities of the Supreme Lord. So when the senses are directed to these material activities, then the senses are entangled. The mind is also entangled. But the same senses, when they are engaged in the service of the Lord, then automatically the senses become controlled by these demigods. These senses, since these senses are representation of the demigods, and the mind is a representation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, led by mind, these senses can be used in the service of the Lord. That is why it is said, like I mentioned, the previous sloka, Sarvopati Vinirmuktam, Tatparat Enel Manu Shikesh Tirtha. When the services of the body are engaged in the services of the senses of the Lord, for which the Lord is known as Rishikesha. Senses means Rishik, and the master of the senses, who is the Supreme Lord, is called Rishikesha. He is the ultimate proprietor, and ultimate master of all the senses, because demigods are also controlled by the Supreme Lord. So when these materially contaminated mind and senses are engaged in the service of the Lord, then the services are perfect. And that is the stage one gets what is called Uttama Bhakti. That is called the perfect Bhakti. So that is the real sadhana by which we start practicing the rules and regulations of devotional service. And when we do this, then over a period of time, the senses automatically become engaged in the service of the Lord, and one can reach a stage of prema by which one can attain this bliss. So Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur comments that bhakti is beyond the 3 gunas and is directed to the Lord in Shuddha Sattva. Shuddha Sattva means it is beyond the 3 modes of material nature. in text number 33. We go to text number 33, where Lord Kapila explains now about the devotional service. He says, Bhakti or devotional service dissolve the subtle body of the living entity without separate effort, just as fire in the stomach digests all that we eat. So when we eat food, what happens is that there is a fire in the stomach that digests the food. Similarly, when one practices devotional service, it dissolves the subtle body of every living entity without any separate effort. So if you connect to the previous sloka, we try to engage in so many other activities, but the same thing when the senses are engaged in that by through devotional service to the Supreme Lord, then automatically they become free from engagement in all that is material. And it is just like the bhakti actually dissolves the subtle body of a living entity without any separate effort. The subtle body are mind, intelligence, and false ego. So when one practices devotional service, the subtle body is automatically dissolved without any separate endeavor for it. So the example is given that in bhakti, just when we eat food, what happens is that unwanted uh, products come out through the process of excretion, and then the body gets nourished by what is required for the body. The stomach actually, the fire actually takes the ingredients from the food that we eat and nourishes the body. Similarly, when we do bhakti, it destroys the material covering of the senses and activates the spiritual aspect. The second thing that happens when one practices bhakti is when one eats, one need not endeavor to digest. Similarly, when one practices bhakti, one need not endeavor for liberation. A healthy person actually need not endeavor to digest. When his body is healthy, automatically digestion takes place. So when one practices bhakti, one does not have to separately endeavor for liberation or become free from the material miseries. Automatically, just like digestion takes place, one attains the supreme happiness. And third thing that happens is that when we eat, it takes about 6 to 8 hours for us to digest. Similarly, when we practice bhakti, the tendency to enjoy is eliminated gradually over a period of time. So what happens is that when we practice bhakti, three things happen. One is it destroys the subtle body, which is the mind, intelligence, and false ego. And then what happens is that one does not endeavor for liberation, and then over a period of time, one becomes perfect in bhakti, in the process of bhakti itself, which can lead one to prema. So, Srila Prabhupada also quotes about a quote from Sri Villamangala Thakula, one of the acharyas in our Sampradaya. He says, if I have unflinching devotion unto the lotus feet of the Lord, then mukti or liberation serves me as my maid servant. Mukti, the maid servant, is always ready to do whatever I ask. The point is that when one practices bhakti, one does not have to try to attain mukti. Mukti automatically stands by the door asking to be served by me. So mukti always is asking, what you want, I'm prepared to give liberation. Now, that is how bhakti is. So when we practice bhakti, we don't have to separately endeavor for mukti or liberation from this material world. And then there's a mention about how impersonalists go through a lot of austerities and penances to attain that mukti. But by bhakti, simply by engaging our tongue in chanting the holy name of the Lord, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, and by accepting the remnants of the footsteps offered to the Lord, then one automatically engages the tongue in service of the Lord, and the tongue is controlled. And when the tongue is controlled, automatically the other senses become controlled. So two ways. One is by chanting the holy name of the Lord, and by accepting the remnants, that is accepting the Krishna Prasada, one's tongue becomes controlled. And when the tongue is controlled, all other senses automatically become controlled. And through this process, one's liberation immediately begins. As soon as one begins engaged in the service of the Lord, when one engages in bhakti, liberation automatically begins. We go to text number 34. A pure devotee who is attached to the activities of devotional service and who always engages in the service of my lotus feet never desires to become one with me. Such a devotee who is unflinchingly engaged always glorifies my pastimes and activities. So a devotee, here there's a mention about pure devotee. One might not be a pure devotee at the beginning stage of the devotional service, but when one practices devotional service constantly, he reaches this stage. And what is this thing? He is attached to the devotional service to the Lord and always engaged in the service of the Lord's lotus feet. And such a devotee, it is mentioned here, never desires to become one with the Lord. Such a devotee always prefers to glorify the Lord's pastimes and activities. Now, here there's a mention about 5 kinds of liberation. That is Sayujya, Samipya, Sarupya, Salokya, and Shashti. So I'll explain in brief these 3 types of liberations. Sayujya is trying to become one with the Lord by entering the Brahma Jyoti. That is called Ekatmatam. But devotee does not want this. The other 4 liberations are to be promoted as the same planet as the Lord. This is one. That is Salokya. Then to associate personally with the Supreme Lord, that is Samipya. And then to achieve the same opulence as the Lord, that is called Shashti, and to attain the same bodily features as the Supreme Lord, which is Sarupya. That is Ayujya, Samipya, Sarupya, Salokya, and Shashti. But the pure devotee here, Lord Kapila explains, is not interested even in attaining any of these liberations. Why? Because he always wants to be engaged in devotional service to the Lord. He wants to be engaged in serving the lotus feet of the Lord. Such a devotee does not want to become even one with the Lord. He always wants to attain the service unto the Lord's lotus feet. Now here there's mention about the impersonalists. They try to attain Brahma Jyoti. There in the Brahma Jyoti, there is no discussion about the glories of the Lord. One cannot see the beautiful form of the Lord, and they don't get a chance to serve the Lord. These 3 things are absent in the Brahma Jyoti. That is why devotees are never interested in attaining this Brahma Jyoti, because these 3 things are not there. That means they can't see the beautiful form of the Lord, they can't discuss about the glories of the Lord, and they don't get a chance to serve the Lord also. That is why devotees are not interested in entering the Brahma Jyoti. So here Lord Kapila clearly states that bhakti or transcendental engagement in activities in the devotional service are transcendental to mukti. That is why it is called Panchama Purushartha. The first 4 Purusharthas are people generally wanting to achieve dharma, artha, kama, moksha. They practice religion to attain some sense gratification. Dharma, artha, kama. They engage in activities to attain some moksha and then attain mukti. But bhakti is something transcendental to this mukti also. That is why the 5th Purushartha is the loving service of the Lord, or prema. Attaining the prema means rendering transcendental loving service of the Lord. So this Srimad Bhagavatam is scripture which is specially meant to understand this pure bhakti of the Lord. So in the beginning of Bhagavatam, there is a sloka itself in the 112, Canto 1, Chapter 1, Text 2. It says, completely rejecting all religious activities which are materially motivated, this Bhagavata Purana propounds the highest truth which is understandable by those devotees who are pure in their heart. The highest truth is really distinguished from illusion for welfare of all. Such a truth approves the threefold miseries. This beautiful Bhagavatam compiled by the great sage Vyasadeva is sufficient in itself for God realization. What is the need for any other scripture? And as soon as one attentively and submissively hears the message of Bhagavatam, by this culture of knowledge, the Lord is established within the heart. That means Dharma Projita Kaitavo, this is the sloka. This Srimad Bhagavatam propounds the highest truth, that is the absolute truth, and which makes one approve the threefold miseries in this material world. And by hearing this message of Srimad Bhagavatam, the Lord is established in the heart. The Lord is already in the heart, but one can realize the presence of the Lord by the process of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. There is a similar prayer by Prithu Maharaj in the 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, where he says, my dear Lord, I do not wish to have the benediction of merging into your existence. That is the Brahma Jyoti. And he says a benediction in which there is no existence of the nectarian beverage of your lotus feet. I want the benediction of at least 1 million years, for thus I may be able to hear about the glories of your lotus feet from the mouths of your devotees. So here Prithu says, I don't want a benediction of entering into Brahmajyoti. He said that I don't want a benediction in which there is no chance to hear the nectarian beverage of your lotus feet. That means I don't want to have a benediction where there is no place to hear your glories. I only want a benediction by which I may have 1 million years through which I may be able to hear the glories of your lotus feet from the mouth of your devotees. We'll proceed a little bit faster because almost 10 slokas to be done. Text number 35. So in text 35, he says, Oh, my mother, my devotees always see the smiling face of my form with eyes like the rising morning sun. They like to see my various transcendental forms, which are all benevolent, and they always talk favorably with me. So here, in this, Lord Kapila is explaining that devotees always want to see the smiling face of the Lord. And then the various forms of the Lord, once they see the smiling face of the Lord, they always want to speak with the Lord. So by practicing the devotion service here, it is mentioned that the Lord rewards his devotee by revealing his spiritual form, by which the devotee can see his beautiful form. And the Lord not only reveals his form, but also bestows his blessings to the devotees of the Lord. For which it is mentioned that Mayavadis normally, when they go to a temple, they see the deity form of the Lord as idol, but actually they are the Archa incarnations of the Lord. Archa incarnation means the Lord is physically present in the deity form of the Lord, and it is an expansion of his original spiritual form. So it is non-different from the Lord. Whereas Mayavadis are impersonally, they think that the form of the Lord in the temple is not spiritual, rather it's just like an idol. But when one performs the devotion service, the Lord is merciful to the devotee to reveal his beautiful forms. Lord has got many transcendental forms, Rama, Krishna, Narasimha, etc. And the Lord reveals his form to the devotee, by which the devotee is able to realize the beautiful form of the Lord. And also, a devotee reaches a stage where he wants to speak with the Lord, and he speaks to the Lord also. Not only he speaks to the Lord, and the Lord reciprocates also. But how it is done? By accepting a spiritual master, because the spiritual master teaches how to decorate the deity in the temple, how to clean the temple, etc. Text number 36. Upon seeing the charming forms of the Lord, smiling and attractive, and hearing his very pleasing words, the pure devotee almost loses all other consciousness. His senses are freed from all their engagement, and he becomes absorbed in devotional service. Thus, in spite of his unwillingness, he attains liberation without separate endeavor. So here we come to the next ultimate point. When one starts engaging in devotional service of the Lord, he goes to a temple, sees the beautiful form of the Lord, smiling and very attractive. And when he hears the glories of the Lord, he loses attraction for all other material activities. His senses are free from all other engagements, and he is absorbed purely in devotional service. And thus, even against his unwillingness, he attains liberation without a separate endeavor. So one does not have to attain separately, put his time to get and efforts to get liberation, but he automatically gets liberation. So there is a mention about three classes of devotees. That is first class devotee, second class devotee, and third class devotee. So the third class devotees are the devotees who are searching after liberation. And in this verse, it explained that even though the third class devotees are aspiring for liberation, they automatically get this by when they are firmly fixed in this Krishna consciousness, by engaging themselves in the service of the Lord. So examples are given that great impersonalists like Sukadeva Goswami, the Kumara, they were all earlier attracted to the beauty of the deities. Even like devotees like Sukadeva Goswami, the four Kumara, they were all impersonalists. But they got attracted by seeing the beauty of the Lord in the temple, and by decoration and aroma of the tulsi that is offered to the Lord, the Kumaras became actually devotees. Kumaras were actually impersonalists, but they became devotees of the Lord by just smelling the aroma of tulsi that was offered to the Lord. So even though they were impersonalists, instead of remaining impersonalists, they got attracted by seeing the beauty of the Lord and became devotees. So that is why it is said that one should visit the temple of the Lord, and not one should not visit that as a ritual, but rather hear the glories of the Lord by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita. Therefore, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recommended 5 important processes in the discharge of devotional service: to chant the holy names of the Lord, the Mahamantra, to associate with devotees and serve them as far as possible, to hear Srimad Bhagavatam, to see the decorated temple and the deity if possible, and to live in a holy place like Vrindavana and Mathura. So we also have heard that when one associates with devotees of the Lord and constantly engage, that place itself becomes a holy place. Holy places are places of pilgrimage, and wherever a pure devotee stays, they are all places of holy pilgrimage. Text number 37. Thus, because he is completely absorbed in thought of me, the devotee does not desire even the highest benediction obtainable in the high upper planetary system, including Satyaloka. He does not desire the 8 material perfections obtained from mystic yoga, nor does he desire to be elevated to the kingdom of God. Yet, even without desiring them, the devotee enjoys, even in this life, all the offered benedictions. So we'll understand this very important sloka. So there are different classes of devotees who try to attain different things. One is many try to attain the higher planetary system, which I mentioned before, including Satyaloka, where the lifespan is very, very long. The living standards are very high, but devotees don't want that also. Then there are some who may try to attain the eightfold mystic perfections, which is called the mystic yoga. The devotees don't aspire for this mystic yoga also, but devotees, the third category of devotees who want to go to the kingdom of God, devotees don't aspire for that also, because even without desiring these, the devotee enjoys even in this material life all these offered benediction. That means by performing bhakti, one attains all that can be attained by Jnana Yoga, Bhakti, and Dhyana Yoga also. And just since the devotee is always absorbed in the thought of the Lord, he does not aspire even for the highest benediction. Text number 38. The Lord continued, my dear mother, devotees who receive such transcendental opulence are never bereft of them. Neither weapons nor the change of time can destroy such opulences. And because the devotees accept me as their friend, their relative, their son, preceptor, benefactor, and the supreme deity, they cannot be deprived of their possessions at any time. Now, so far, we have seen how Lord Kapila is explaining to Mother Devahuti, by performing devotion service, one can automatically get all that can be attained by other forms of yoga. Here, he is giving one more benediction. He says, my dear mother, devotees who receive such transcendental opulences are never bereft of them. Neither weapons nor change of time can destroy such opulences, because devotees accept the Lord as their friend. There are different relationships that devotee establishes in the process of devotion service. He establishes, he serves the Lord as a servant, he serves the Lord as a friend, he serves the Lord as a parent, serves the Lord in conjugal relationships. So devotees who are already in these relationships, because devotees are situated in these relationships with the Lord, they are never bereft of these opulences at any point of time, and time does not destroy these opulences. Actually, time takes everything in this material world. Everything that is there that we see opulence, it is the time that takes away everything. But one who practices devotional service, Lord Kapila is assuring that he is not deprived of these opulences at any point of time, because they are eternal in nature for the devotees. So one who is fixed in devotional service, all these opulence, he achieves opulence, all these opulences in the spiritual planets. He does not have to attain artificially like mystic power, etc. So there is an eternal propensity for us to love the living entities, to love. And because we don't try to aim at the Supreme Personality of Godhead as a friend, as a son, etc., we try to establish our relationship with others in different ways and means. And then there's further mention, if Krishna is accepted as a son, he will never die. Here we have a very loving son, or a child, but the father and mother who are affectionate towards him always hope my son not die. But Krishna actually will never die. Therefore, those who accept Krishna as the Supreme Lord, as their son, will never be bereft of their son. There are many instances of devotees who have accepted Krishna as their son, where the Lord has performed even the Shraddha ceremony for the father. So there is an example of a devotee who has accepted the Lord as a son, and the Lord performed the Shraddha for the father. So when one accepts the Lord as a son, or as a servant, as a friend, or in the conjugal relationships, one will never be cheated by the Lord. And that's why it is said that the Lord always takes care of them. Text number 39 and 40. Thus, the devotee who worships me, the all-pervading Lord of the universe, in unflinching devotional service, gives up all aspirations to be promoted to heavenly planets, or to become happy in this world with wealth, children, cattle, home, anything in relationship with the body. I take him to the other side of birth and death. Here, Lord Kapila further explains what are the benefits of practicing devotional service. By engaging in unflinching devotional service, one gives up all aspirations to be promoted to heavenly planets or attain worldly wealth like children, wealth, etc. The Lord says, I take him to the other side of birth and death. I make him free from the cycle of birth and death. That's the devotee worships. He does not have to take birth again in this material world. So the point is that as a sadhaka, as we progress, we overcome the attachments that we develop to family, wealth, etc. But at the same time, the Lord gives all these benedictions also. But a devotee is not interested in all these other than engaging in the service of the Lord. Another important point that by practicing devotional service, a living entity becomes affectionate to other living entities, and other living entities become affectionate to one who practices devotional service. Third thing is that he becomes very happy and he develops all good qualities. Text number 41. The terrible fear of birth and death can never be forsaken by anyone who resorts to any shelter other than myself. For I am the Almighty Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the original source of all creation, and also the Supreme Soul of all souls. So one who has surrendered to the Lord, then the question comes, how does he overcome the fear of not serving the other demigods? Now, demigods are also assistants to the Lord who take charge of the various affairs of this material universe, management of the universal affairs. And then the question comes, how can one overcome the fear of birth and death? But by taking the process of devotional service, devotees need not worry separately about not being able to serve the other demigods, etc. But by taking up the path of devotional service, one can escape the cycle of birth and death. And the next is Loka, the Lord gives example. He tells Mother Devavati, it is because of my supremacy that the wind blows. Out of fear of me, the sun shines. Out of fear of me, and the Lord of clouds, Indra, sends forth showers out of fear of me. Fire burns out of fear of me. And death goes about taking its toll out of fear of me. So here, Lord Kapila is explained that one does not have to separately worship anyone else other than the Supreme Lord. He says that it is out of fear of me that the wind blows. It is out of fear of me that the sun shines. And it is out of fear of the Lord that Indra sends forth the clouds of showers. And it is due to fear of the Lord that death takes a toll. So by performing devotional service to the Lord, all the worship of the demigods are already taken care of, and they need not fear as to whether they have undertaken worship of the demigods or not. The worship of all others are automatically taken care of. Just like watering the root of a tree, one automatically waters the roots, the branches and roots, etc. Text 43. The yogis develop a transcendent knowledge and renunciation and engaged in devotional service for their eternal benefit. Take shelter of my lotus feet. And since I am the Lord, they are thus able to enter into the kingdom of God without fear. So the devotees of the Lord, when they practice bhakti, they already develop the transcendental knowledge and detachment. And being engaged in the devotion service of the Lord and taking shelter of them, of the Lord, they become eligible to enter into the kingdom of God without fear. So then, like I mentioned, there are many pros of yoga. But even if a person is illiterate, but still he becomes eligible to be engaged in loving service to the Lord. Text number 44, the last sloka. I'll take one more minute. Therefore, whose persons whose minds are fixed on the Lord, engage in the intensive practice of devotional service, that is the only means for attainment of the final perfection of life. That means those who are always fixed on the Lord's service and always engaged in devotional service, that is the only way to attain final perfection of life. Perfection of life should be always mind and senses should be engaged in the service of the Lord. That is what is called Bhakti Yoga. Yoga means trying to control the mind and the senses, but artificially, however, whoever tries, it cannot be achieved. But by practicing Bhakti Yoga, one can attain all perfection in life, and not only one gets liberated, but one can attain all the opulences that one can attain by practice of other yoga practices. The point is that I'll summarize the whole thing in a minute. We see that Devahuti wanted liberation from this material world, but Lord Kapila starts explaining about devotional service. To develop a taste for devotional service, he suggests a recommendation of association with devotees of the Lord and hearing about the glories of the Lord in their association. So when she associates with devotees and hears the glories, automatically she will develop detachment from all that is material. And then she asks about how to attain that service to the lotus feet. So from the stage of liberation, she's coming to a state by hearing from Lord Kapila. She's setting an example how to attain this service at the lotus feet of the Lord. And by attaining service and by performing devotional service at the lotus feet of the Lord, one automatically gets liberated. And not only that, he attains all the benedictions that which were available in all other poses of yoga, like wealth. He becomes free from all the cycle of birth and death and attains all the opulence that is required and which will be available to the devotee even in this material world, and it will never be taken away even when one reaches spiritual world, which will be abundant in all the opulence. With this, I conclude the class for the day. I have extended because there were many important slokas. I can take questions or comments for the next couple of minutes.